Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today at the Informed Perspective. Whether you know a bit about what we're up to or not, we are all about community, and that's very handy because this month happens to be the theme of the month, community at the Informed Perspective. And because of that, we've invited along some very inspiring speakers who are doing great things in their community. Just to give a tiny bit of background to what we're doing, we are trying to reinvent community, so encourage and motivate and enthuse people to get back out there and even give just a tiny bit of their time. So even if it's just an hour, to step up, go out of your comfort zone and see maybe some of the magic that might come out of the community. So on that point, I wanted to just do a couple of little quotes that I found on community, ding ding, and I just thought that would be a nice way to sort of start our discussion going. The first quote is from The Social Animal by David Brooks. Humans are driven not only by the need to survive, but also by the need to belong, to connect, and to contribute to something larger than themselves. And then from The Great Good Place by Ray Oldenburg, we might talk of a community as a third place, a unique and yet essential environment in our lives, independent from family and work. And from the same author, the true value of a third place is that it provides people with a space to form meaningful connections and escape the isolation of home or work. And then actually I wanted to add just one more because I happened to read a paper this morning, and it is by Saiham Kumar, and it's called The Determinants of Community Engagement and Its Role in Income Poverty Reduction. And it's just sort of touched a note because it takes a slightly different slant on community. Community engagement is a widely used approach for solving social and economic problems and improving people's livelihoods around the world. Various studies have explained the role of community engagement in social well-being, heritage conservation, relocation adaptation in older women, crime control, healthcare systems, and post-disaster reconstruction. Such engagements can promote social justice, transformation, and empowerment of communities. And these activities, according to this research, may decrease or even eradicate poverty. So I hope maybe during our discussion today, we might delve into a little bit of that. But we want to now turn to our guests today, who are doing lots of amazing things in their community. So without further ado, let's continue. And I will pass over to my wonderful working partner, Jenny.
Thank you, everyone. And so it's lovely. Penny always starts with some nice quotes for consideration, inspiring often, but really nice just to take a moment to think and hear what other people are saying around community or the topic we're exploring. So our guest today that are joining us for our discussion on community is Faye. So Faye spent 10 years as a tax manager, but due to the lack of work-life boundaries, it led to decline in health, and you realised the need for change and shifted your focus to nutrition. 15 years later, becoming a health and wellbeing coach. Through her company, Move Mindset, you empower individuals to improve their mental health through movement while also guiding to prioritise their wellbeing. She teaches the Walk Active method and places strong emphasis on connection and community in her work. And Melissa is a Mexican psychologist specializing in adults and multicultural couples. With over 16 years experience in Poland, she has helped clients from 35 countries deepen self-awareness, navigate emotions, and build healthier relationships. Melissa has spoken and run workshops across communities to learn how to live and thrive in Poland. And Loraine is a life and workplace coach since 2002 and holds an Advanced Diploma in Counselling and Psychology. With 30 plus years experience in international education leadership, including head of corporate services in the British Embassy in Rome, she designed leadership programs and focuses on workplace wellbeing and intergenerational teamwork. Her work emphasises the importance of rebuilding meaningful connections in society. So hopefully that gives everyone a brief introduction to one another. and, you know, a bit of context as to why we've invited you all here today. Our normal format is just to pose a question each to you. After the first person's answered the question, please just chip in. This is just a nice, relaxed discussion. If you've got something burning to say, you know, we all know how to politely interrupt people at this stage of the game. So yeah, it would be lovely to hear your thoughts, and then we'll move on to pose a question to the next person and see what we lay on the table and carry on the discussion thereafter. So I hand back to Penny, who will start the questions.
This is where I do eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'm going to go in for Faye this morning. So hi, Faye. I wanted to ask you in particular, you've started doing menopause meetings in your community. And I wanted to ask you really, what inspired you to start doing that?
Well, really, I suppose it came off the back of me deciding to have my own business as a health and wellbeing coach, and sat behind my computer at home in my office, not really connecting with people other than virtually, of course, which was fine, but I felt like there was something really missing. And actually, as a coach, I didn't feel like I was really, you know, there wasn't the impact that I wanted to make. I wanted to sort of reach out to people, and community has always been important to me. So that, combined with the fact that I had this desire to sort of start something in my own community to kind of help other people that might be feeling the same as me, knowing that a lot of people work behind a desk all the time. The most obvious thing really was menopause, because it's something I was going through. I was struggling with symptoms. And if I'm honest, I didn't really know a lot about it. And I felt that the information I did know was very much, you can take HRT. And I thought, well, actually, that's fine. But I want to kind of know a bit more. I don't want to just, you know, do that without understanding and knowing more. And maybe there might be people that would also like to know a bit more about it. So that's kind of what inspired me, really. And, you know, you have those conversations at the school gates or wherever you are, and, you know, it comes up a lot in my world. So it just seemed like the most obvious place to start. And I really wanted to focus on understanding what was important for the people that were coming along, rather than dictating what we'd be talking about. So that's kind of where I started.
Love that. So when you first met, was the first thing to do is just to hear their stories?
Yeah, hear their stories and to really understand, you know, kind of explain where I was coming from, but just sort of really understand what would be helpful for them. You know, they all have access to obviously the NHS and support through that. And some of them had gone down, you know, had that support, and others hadn't. So what would kind of a menopause cafe or a community group, what did they want from that? What would be helpful? And I think pretty much they all agree that they wanted more information, but bite size, so not. And I think one of the issues we talked around was there's information everywhere. If you look on the internet, you can find so many bits of information, but sometimes that can be in itself quite overwhelming. So just kind of to touch on subject areas, maybe just 5-10 minutes, and then have a discussion around that was what they felt would be really helpful.
And how do you think that's impacted then the people that you've been helping, or the people who've been participating? Have you seen anything coming out of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got quite a mix of people from different backgrounds, and I think it's surprised some of them in the terms that they haven't necessarily had that opportunity to share their experiences and actually think about how it's affecting them. So that's been really nice that they've had that space to kind of actually really think, how am I feeling about all of these things? And I think the other thing was what I feel is really helpful is being able to share their thoughts and experiences without that judgment, you know, not feeling like, you know, it's very much their story, not what they're hearing or what they're being told that they should be thinking about this stage of life. But actually there can be some similarities as well. And it's kind of almost, I think one of the pieces of feedback I received was about kind of making her feel more normal in a good way, as in, you know, she wasn't on her own when she kind of had these feelings and thoughts. So yeah, there's been lots of things. And interestingly enough, one of my interests is around supporting women to kind of perhaps look into ways that they might be able to have a different career. And funnily enough, a couple of the ladies there, and it might just be a coincidence, have started to think about, you know, their work-life balance and whether work is working for them and what might they do instead. Like I say, maybe just a coincidence, but that has come up.
Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just the fact that they're being listened to and sort of giving time to themselves, right? That we don't always do in our daily lives.
Absolutely. So maybe thinking there's a different way of doing things.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I think it's, as we've often reflecting on that, and lots of times, and I can feel it coming already today, you know, everything comes back to similar themes. I'm not going to table them, so I'm not leading, but you know, that personal reflection actually, and taking the time, but you need the space to do that, and it's not always possible to create that space yourself. You need it to be available to you, and that's I think it's been really powerful in what you do, Faye. You know, that from a personal to a shared experience, you know, creating space for people to come together.
Yeah.
And that collective thing, like not suffering alone, like you said, like it affects so many people, and yet it's sort of pushed under the table, isn't it? Menopause, like, oh, it doesn't affect anyone, never heard of it, but all of you are going to suffer like hell, but alone. It's huge, and I think that's a really nice way and a sort of familiar environment to be able to address that, not in a clinical doctor's office or wherever else it might be. So that's really. Yeah, I think I need a menopause cafe at some point, so I'll be hitting you up.
But the other thing I wanted to say actually is something that someone said to me yesterday. I was at a Health and Wellbeing conference, and so we always manage to have a laugh, and I think that actually is how often, and that's actually the lady working in the cafe, she noticed that should you come in, and then by the end of it, you're all laughing and you're all really upbeat. So even just changing that kind of state from you know, the kind of head place to just relaxing and enjoying, you know, just the moment.
And that sort of human contact, that people are, you know, you're more perceptive of each other and willing to sort of open up in person, and this sort of culture of sending emails or whatever, it's very easy to just not commit and it's motionless in a way, right? And when you're in person, those connections are so valuable, and really nice. Right. Anybody like to chip into that, Loraine or Melissa?
Yes, please. It's very, very interesting. Thank you so much, Faye. I've been paying particular attention to this issue in the workplace, having, you know, been in the workplace myself for many, many, many years. The menopause was a really scary transition in relation to work performance. And it's something which I've talked quite a lot about with other women. I can remember I used to do a lot of public speaking, giving presentations, and I'd be standing in front of a crowd of people of various sizes, and I would completely lose my train of thought. I'd be standing there in front of these people with sweaty palms going, I don't remember what I was saying, and I don't remember where I'm going. And I remember this being just about the most terrifying thing that I had experienced, because I didn't know whether it was temporary, whether dementia was starting to set in, whether it was, you know. So it was a very scary thing, and there weren't many people around that you felt comfortable talking about this with. Thankfully, I'm in a female relationship, so myself and my partner have been able to go through all of this together and talk about it in depth, which is a massive blessing. So I think that, you know, how menopause affects your mood, how it affects your effectiveness, how it affects your relationships with other people, how it dramatically affects your sleep and therefore your your energy levels and your productivity are things which everybody starts to get terribly afraid of, and you start to think that life is on a downhill trajectory. And I think it's really important to give people assurances that that's not the case, that these are phases, and that we should be able to talk openly with sympathetic people on this. And I do believe this needs to be female plus male discussion, because I don't think enough men know enough about the dramatic life changes that women go through in this phase of their life.
Yeah, it's
I
really,
think that's
really frightening.
it's such a great comment to end on, Loraine, because we often, when we were talking about support, we always want to, we're very balanced. We might pose discussions and questions and prompts and guide down certain ways, but we like to try and expand and broaden our perspectives. And we've always trying to remind ourselves to consider like the men, and I was thinking when you were talking, and from the presence of Faye's community cafe, menopause cafe, I think the presence and the physicality of such communities can be as powerful as, even if you're not involved, it can give someone the courage to know that there's somewhere they can turn if they need it. But it can also just build that awareness that actually this is a issue, but this is an area that's important to a number of people, that there is sort of time and consideration that needs to be given to that. And I think to just and that's where when you have embodied kind of movements or ideas, that's I think where a lot of power can be, because there can be males within that cafe thinking, oh, okay, like they must have a lot to talk about if they're here, however often they're here, but equally to expand it to men in an education, from a workplace setting, from a relationship setting as well, is equally as important. So
yeah, and that sort of need to sort of support one another in thriving, right? Women have quite a lot of obstacles that men don't have. I'm aware men have their own, but childbirth's another one. We don't really talk about how painful and what is associated with that and all the horrible stuff that follows up on that. And the same with menopause. And when you say, Loraine, about your career and your profession and all of that, they're huge, too big or potentially more sort of parts of your life that you're having to sort of come back again from near dead in some cases, and have to reinvent yourself in some places or adapt or whatever. And these huge transitions, and we do a Connect coffee now once a month, and we're talking to people, and if we can help one another to sort of support ourselves through these phases, and why can't this mutual support is so beneficial, and having that understanding and sort of saying, look, we can all thrive together. I think that there's additional need for that because of these biological parts in our lives that are so dominant. So.
I think the phases is a really nice one as well. I'm the note taker of the team. If you've noticed me scribbling away, apologies, I didn't put a disclaimer there. But it's the transitions, how communities can support these transitions and these changes. And it's, it's like there's so many that you can experience it so personally and communally as well.
Loraine, how long did that go on with these sort of memory lapses? I mean, how did you view that?
Not well. It felt at the time. It felt like forever. But I think probably for about 2 or 3 years, memory recall was. I started taking more copious notes because I was terrified that I was going to, forget things. You'd be in the middle of a conversation and people would take it in a different direction, and I couldn't find my way back to what I had talking about.
Right,
and I just have to say, well, that's so that kind of sense of not actually wanting to have a conversation because a conversation was dangerous. A conversation meant you just lost your way. But thankfully it didn't last, and I still go, oh my gosh, I've just found my way right back to the beginning of that conversation again, and the point I was trying to make. And that, so yeah, thankfully it didn't last very long, and how long menopause can affect you. It seemed a short period of time in relation to that, but
just
the
sharing that
the most
experience
terrifying
is also
part for me,
amazing.
that was.
Yeah, but if people like you
Yeah,
can also
yeah.
communicate, you know, with the people who are up and coming for, you know, for menopause, that's huge, you know, being able to sort of say it's going to be all right, you'll be
Yeah,
okay
yeah.
in the end. You might have a patchy
It
period, I
is,
hope
yeah.
shorter rather than longer, but that's so valuable to know that.
I would like to comment that in my practice, I've seen that what Loraine is saying is actually really real. Yes, is real. Also, there is a lot of stress. There is a lot of sleep deprivation, and you know, complaining about those kind of stuff is like even hard to admit. Yes, that I am having troubles. I cannot
Weakness,
sleep.
yeah.
I cannot concentrate because of that, and then we find out ourselves worrying that I am getting worried. Yes, so is
So
even
cool.
bigger. Yes.
Yeah, that's so true.
The sleep issue, aside from the memory loss, the sleep issue, that one continues. That goes on and on. So I work very, very hard actually at trying to build up healthy sleep patterns. We'll use my smartwatch. You know, I have a sleep coach app, and I really try to maximize, because you know, the days of sleeping all the way through the night seem to have gone, and therefore that, as Melissa is saying, is radically affects your energy levels and your clarity of thinking, and so therefore maximizing sleep as best as you can, understanding what promotes good sleep versus a really bad night, is something that we do need to pay attention to. And I think it would be a really good specific conversation topic to just help people see how they relax their brain, where they take breaks during the day, you know, how they kind of get their brain to regenerate as it needs to on a daily basis. And if you're not sleeping, then you're starting to deteriorate with your mental faculties, and that's really, as Mrs. is, terrifying. You really start to think that, you know, you're losing your mind. And it's really important that we're talking about these things and helping people to say that, you know, this is perfectly okay, and there are things you can do to help yourself and to help each other in the community.
And that other people understand if you're not in a great mood or why you're reacting like you might be. That acceptance.
Yeah. Short-temperedness, irritability, you know, very, very symptomatic of people, of women in, you know, this kind of grumpy middle-aged women syndrome, you know, is so influenced by your, you know, your hormones and your mental health, and so much of that is affected by your sleep, and so much of your sleep is affected by your menopausal phase. So, or other traumas or stresses that you're dealing with, right? It's not only, but sleep is something which I think really needs attention, because I don't think people are sleeping very
no matter what age you're at, right?
No matter what age. Yeah.
And it's such a foundation, it's such a core need, you know, and I think it can get overlooked, and there's so much talk around well-being, but actually, and it will come in there, be within the list, but actually as a prominence and the prominence of the importance of it, I think you've got a really good point there, Loraine. You know, it's, yes, the self-care, oh, get a good night's sleep. Well, it's not always possible, but then, you know, you have to learn to listen to your body and give your body and your whole being that chance. If you're not sleeping well, how else to regenerate? It was quite funny the other day. I think I said to Melissa, I really struggle with the afternoon dip, like the slump. I was probably yawning as I was talking to her during it. And I said, I didn't yesterday. I looked at what I ate. No, it's because I sat on the sofa and I rested. Like I actually gave into it and let my body regenerate. And it's something I don't do. And I was really curious why I didn't feel it yesterday. Oh, because I rested and listened to my body.
I'm sure Melissa will support this, and Faye from the work that they're doing. But you know, taking 10 minutes time out during the day to close your eyes, do some breathing, just allow things to slow down. It's immensely rejuvenating. You know, that you just build the, I mean, you know, the Europeans, the Mediterranean cultures had it right, you know, when they used to, and still try to focus on a siesta period in the afternoon. You know, the fact that we try to get all of our sleep in one chunk in the middle of the night is actually not biologically the healthiest routine.
I'm going to go and have a siesta now. Bye.
So, but you know, if you get 10 minutes out, it's massively helpful.
Yeah.
I think that it's a very good time to learn how to meditate. If we haven't practiced that, if we haven't learned that, is the great moment to start. It's a very good copy mechanism to be able to meditate and maybe not sleep, but rest our mind, rest our spirit, body, soul, and learn how to integrate the whole us in a moment of resting.
I love that too, that it's not necessarily the sleep, it's just taking the pace out and giving yourself time, right, in a certain way, and just and I think that's the thing. You often think, I've got to be sleeping, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that.
Right. I have an aunt, she's a doctor, and she told me once, when I have time for meditating, I do 20 minutes. When I don't have, I do half an hour.
Love it.
It's the opposite.
Right, we're going to take a pivot away from sleeping before we all fall asleep. And I'm going to go to you, Melissa. You have been in Poland for, is it 16 years now?
24.
Oh. Practicing for 16 years then. And I really wanted to ask you, what are the biggest psychological challenges that the Mexican community or the community that you associate with, what do they have when they move to Warsaw and Poland? What have you found the biggest problems to be?
Well, one of it is the language. It's complex from Spanish, which is quite easy, to Polish is very, very, high level. Another one is, of course, the weather, the lack of sun. Yes, I myself, I have to drink vitamin D since September, October, for me not to just want to rest like a bear. Yes, and also, it's to get adapted to a new culture, no matter where you're from, new environments. There are a lot of obstacles. It's hard to find a job with your qualifications, but without the language, for example, or without how to get to those places, because you have no experience in that kind of environment. It can be very, very overwhelming. And for some people, it's very funny, because for some people, they get adapted so easily. Within weeks, months, they are able to find, they know where the post office is, where the best restaurants on town, where to take children, playgrounds. They know everything. And for some people, it's a really challenging and painful time.
Why do you think that might be? That some people find it harder.
Actually, a few days ago, I was invited to provide a talk. It was a women's group, international women's group, and we were talking about this. And one of the words is resilience, and the other word would be my well-being, taking care of myself. because obstacles will be, yes, no matter what you are doing, life is not flat. Life is like this. And in order to get adapted to a new culture, you need to know very well yourself. You need to connect with yourself, and there are some stages in the process of migratory grief, but not all the people will go through them, but some people will. And how to? I mean, why for some people it's easier. I think I've seen that they know what they want. And they get resources from outside. Yes, they play sports, do different activities. They go to different communities. If they believe in spirituality, they go to their church and they go into their beliefs. So they get the musicotherapy is also very, very important. Therapy by itself, yes, if I am struggling with some issues from my past or that I cannot deal with by myself. So people go and ask for help, and then you get it.
Yeah. But you have to ask for it sometimes. It's interesting because I'm just taken back to one of the first jobs I was in, where I worked for an American company, and my boss was an American, and his wife came over to Munich, to Germany, and with her family, and she didn't want to be there from day one, hated it, rejected it, gave off the vibe as well. Germany's awful. Don't want to be here. Don't want to try and learn the language. I'm not going to be. And she was miserable. And she was so isolated because, like you said, she wasn't willing to open herself up to meeting other people. And I know there have been so many people who would have embraced her with their arms wide open, but because she wasn't willing to do that, she then struggled and ultimately then had to go back to America because there was no community for her because she hadn't, let herself accept it or let herself into it. I think that's
right. And also cultural aspects, because in my culture we usually go there and smile. Yes, it's just natural for us. But you go to another culture and it's not, and it's acceptable. But you don't know when you enter to a new culture and you take it personal. Everything you take it personal. Is for me because I look different, because I don't have the accent, because I don't know how to behave in this society. No, it's another society with another way of thinking, and here is right. What for you is wrong. Yes, what for you is normal, here is not. So knowing all those like cultural aspects will help us to embrace the changes and look at them more objectively.
Do you think then that cultural training is very important if you move to a different country?
I do. And also, when you are meeting people from your own countries, and you start talking about the same things, and you realize, oh yes, I have the same. So that it's not for me because I'm Melissa, but it's for everybody. Yes. So Polish people, what I've seen, they take longer time, for example, to open their hearts to the others. But when they do it truly.
Yeah.
They need time. It's not right away, but it is real when they when you see that they want to be friends with you.
It's almost the classic, it's not you, it's them. It is just their culture and their way. And I think that cultural training is quite a really interesting part, because a few of the things you mentioned, Melissa, was they're not really researchable. Like you wouldn't find that when you're just looking up, oh, what's it like to, not, you would even look up that, but like living in Warsaw, it doesn't come in a pack, it doesn't come in the tour guide book. Maybe you would these days through some chat forums find some probably not very positive, discussions around it, but it's these unspoken differences. And exactly that, we started by saying it's until you open up with honesty and courage that you're struggling with X, that you share your experience, your personal experience, and you find it becomes a shared experience, exactly how we opened with, you know, menopause symptoms and experiences. It's, you know, until you are honest and put yourself out there and say, this is really hard for me, you won't know that other people are experiencing it. And you will take it personally, and then that can have such a negative impact.
Melissa,
So
sorry. Carry on.
I remember when I came to Poland, it was March, and I was cold all the time, even inside homes where there was heating. So I was keeping my coat, and people were looking at me like, this is rude. You shouldn't do that. But I'm cold, you know? So so like simple stuff, simple stuff, like very daily things can be so different. It means completely different thing, unless you don't know, until you don't know, you would keep behaving that way, not knowing that is rude, and at the same time the people could understand, right, that you are from another part of the world and you have another way of dressing.
So Melissa, from what you were saying, it sounds as though you sort of say that it's important also to have a community possibly of your own culture within another culture, but also a community in the new country. Is that something that needs to be separate? Is there some crossover with that? How do you help people to build then a support system if they're coming from another culture and arriving?
I think that naturally when you arrive, you want to, at the beginning you are in this honeymoon stage. Yes, everything is wonderful, new. You want to get integrated. You want to know everything and explore, and everything opens your curiosity. But there is a moment when you realize, well, I'm not traveling anymore. This is my life. I need to unpack my luggage and put them on in the shelves. But you are homesick, so you need to go to your roots and speak your own language as well. So it's not that you divide two communities. You can mix. So one thing is to get involved in the new environment, yes, while meeting people from the country where you are now, but also reminding who you were before, and speaking about what you like, what you are used to in your own language, without using your brain so much to concentrate on the new language. Yes.
And do you find that the community here is welcoming to you, sharing your culture with them?
Sure,
Yeah.
of course.
Right.
Yes. When you live abroad, your friends become your family, family that you choose.
I love that.
You mentioned the word grief earlier, and I know you do that in your talks and how you present these challenges. And I think it really struck a chord when you were saying then, and I wanted to table it, but when you were saying as well, you've got to remember what you're missing. You've got to acknowledge that, you've lost something. You're not lost, but you no longer have the culture, the community you were in, and there is that element of loss and grief, and I think you're saying it's important to acknowledge that and accept it and learn to deal with it in a way, in the best way you can.
Yes, it is. Every change, every major change, no matter if this is a transition between a child and teenager, or when you move out from your parents' house, when you get married, when you have children, when you get on the married, every transition like that is related with grieving process. Yes, short, long, hard or not, but it's the moment when you actually have to say goodbye to the previous you that will never come back. So yes, there is a grieving process for sure. And we all react, we all act in different ways, and learning how to cope with that loss is important. Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa. Anybody like to add on to that, Faye or Loraine?
I'd love to comment, actually. Thank you, Melissa, for sharing the challenges that people face. And for me, I did go traveling as a young person, but that was temporary, and somehow managed to make it all English-speaking countries. So it's a challenge I've never really had to face, and I'm very much aware of that. But what it did make me think about was when I was 11, I moved from Birmingham to Southampton in the UK, and it wasn't moving countries, but it was felt like quite a significant change. And I think also the timing of it, starting a secondary school at that time as well. And I know, Penny and Jenny, your work with the tweens, the tween talks, this is kind of relevant. And I'm now, even now sitting here now, realise that I was grieving. And I did all the things that wouldn't help. I was that person that shut down and became isolated and didn't want to connect with my new community. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. And I think that definitely, if I'd have been open to joining in a bit more, then probably I would have saved myself a lot of pain. But yes, I'm able to sort of sit back and reflect on that. And it makes me think about, in schools, children that are new, that's quite a challenging thing to overcome.
Yeah, that communities for the children, right, is so important.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing I was going to mention was actually in our own local community, we've had a big, a lot of families from Hong Kong have moved to this area. And I was working in a school at the time that it seemed to really happen. And I think they recognised that children were actually able to make those changes from a language perspective fairly easily, fairly quickly. But actually it was the cultural changes and the sort of education around behavioural, what's accepted, that was the thing that they actually had to help them with. So interesting to hear that.
And that's crucial. Because if you're going to go into a new culture and just sort of be thrown into it, and you don't as a child as well, at any age, if you don't have any support, that makes it just double as hard, And I think, like you said, going back to the age of moving at secondary school, that is an age as well where you want to fit in, don't you? You want to be your tribe, you want to be with your people, and by the sounds of things, you were taken away from what you had, and then you're having to find again that new identity that Melissa also said. So it's really difficult, tricky time.
A lot around expectations, isn't there? What you think you might have, and also what the environment that you're going into, be it a health stage or life stage or physical place, the expectations that already exist there, there isn't, I keep going back to, there almost isn't a handbook, is there really to it? But I think that's where it comes around to the community. You need to have those people there as a sounding board to I know that it's okay to feel like this, or this is how you learn more about it. I'm thinking about the children in the schools as well. There's a few quite different things that they do here, or the expectations they have. I can make silly comments about wearing hats and things like that, and they can't be seen outside without a hat. You will get stopped in the road. Obviously I'm being whimsical with it, but unless you're you kind of go and to understand it more and get involved in that community, you're not really going to truly be able to thrive, I guess, is the point I'm making.
But also being aware that there is a community, right? That is also the thing. Is there one? And if there is, how do you get in touch with it? All the hurdles when you're going through a difficult time anyway. So yeah. Okay, Loraine, did you want to add anything?
Such an interesting theme, and thank you very much, Melissa, for your thoughts. I am 61 years of age, and I have been living in different international communities since the mid-1980s, going from one country to another without ever being fluent in any of the languages of any of the countries that I have lived in. And I think that it's such an interesting subject. And I could talk about this for weeks, but let's keep this very, very concise. The bit that I'm very familiar with cultural training and the stages of culturalization and the honeymoon phases and this. The bit that I think was particularly interesting for me and what you were talking about there was your comments and knowledge around life transitions and the grief involved in having to say goodbye to your previous self. Wow, that is really something that resonates with me, and actually resonates with me for the first time, because transitioning from one country to another has been incredibly difficult. So not just the sort of, how do you acculturize to the place you're going to, but how do you cope with the grief of having left the place that you were? So that has been particularly pertinent to me, and I'm very grateful to have heard your thoughts on that. Something I will think a lot more about and would love to continue the conversation on that. One thing I do feel is important to emphasize is that the way people behave in any community, in any social context, whether it's within their own country, whether it's in their own school, whether it's in a different country, different school, on the playground, what you see isn't necessarily what is going on. And we're very quick to judge people's confidence and adaptability to the way they are behaving. We think we understand people by looking at them and observing them. And of course, we're only getting part of the story. Therefore, again, I think that the conversations, the communities, in order for people to openly talk about themes which are relevant, are incredibly important. I think that the sense of inadequacy is a very, very key theme for many people, whether it's language, whether it's behaviours, whether it's fitting into a community. I think that people have so many fears of adapting, and that is something which people are feeling is very, very stressful and creates such anxiety for so many people. And sometimes that's even with the people who seem to be doing okay. It is one thing to be able to find the post office. It is a different thing entirely to that lovely way you said it. I think it was you, Jenny, that said it, that friends become your family when you're abroad. It's such an important theme. That transition that doesn't happen overnight. That takes time and confidence to overcome your embarrassments and your introvert nature or whatever else that might be, making it more difficult. And if you don't set off on the right footing, it gets more and more difficult. That's what we forget as well. If you're not getting that support in the early stages, then you can start to feel even more isolated, as time goes by. So I think this is a really important conversation for international communities in any context, a really valuable one to make sure we keep alive.
And I think Loraine as well, when you're saying it, I think it is so pertinent and obvious in international communities, but especially when we're thinking about community and your friends becoming your family, like it makes me think that can be anywhere, because you don't choose your family. And it's often spoken about in the parenting community, support community, your tribe. Who is your tribe? Okay. And it's you know, who are you finding and surrounding yourself with? And this is something I've spent not necessarily a lot of time doing, but I'm really interested in it. And as I've come to, you know, I've transitioned to somewhere new, I've reflected on it more, but it's, yeah, who is there for you, who expands you, who supports you, who's there when you need a cuppa, when you need a cry, when you need, you know. And so I really think that it's a really lovely essence, you know, of community, because it's those that are around you, and it doesn't have to be, or a community doesn't always have to be something that already exists. It's something you can create. And we've spoken about it in kind of you know, Faye's concept of, you know, bringing people together through a shared experience, but actually, like, you can, I want to say, be the center of your own community. It sounds a bit egotistical, but, you know, they can be created. And it really made me think when you said that about the tribe, you know, find your tribe. It's quite a phrase at the moment, but I really like it, and it doesn't have to be static and set. It can be whatever you need, whenever you need it.
It's definitely easier for some people than others, isn't it, to try and find that tribe and get out there. And I think that's the challenge, that potentially there are lots of people out there who really do need a community, and they do need it, but aren't as outgoing as me or someone else who might be more willing to say, hey, do you want to be in my tribe? And I think that is the challenge, because, you know, the community is in its diversity, right? Is all the richer with all different types of people, and you know, whether you're outgoing or not outgoing, whatever. So I think that is important to consider. How do you reach these people who could be in your community, want to be in your community, but you might not be on your radar because they're just not putting themselves out there?
And I would like to comment, Jenny, you said, yes, you don't choose your family. Yes, you can choose your friends. So I remember once, I mean, I was going to some choir lessons, and at the end I would drive a lady, an older lady, to her home every week. Yes. And she reminded me of my mom, and I am very, very close to my mom. And once I told her, you know, you will be my mom. I need you to be my mom in this moment. And she would say, so you can be my daughter. And you know, we would be, we were talking. I would tell her some things, she would complain or whatever. And it was this kind of bond. Yes. It lasted some years. She went to another country, and I hope she would find another daughters. And I have to look for another mom. But you know, it's to try to put some positivity on people when they are lost and they are looking for some tools. What we try to do is to start selecting the parts of myself that I want to keep from my past, from my previous culture, and also the new ones. So it's like integrating to me, yes, in one. And I have the opportunity, now that I am out of my comfort
zone. Yeah.
Yes. Now I have the opportunity to select what do I want to keep and what I didn't have, which I don't know, ideas or behaviors I was not able to learn because in my culture there were not, but here they are. And what can I add to my life? And I think this is also, it helps me to one of the stages, one of the last stages, bicultural identity in this reading process.
Before we flip to another question, I just wanted to sort of also say to that, I've learned over time, like from all the different countries that I've lived in, that initially, or even just, you know, getting involved with new communities when you gave birth and having children, having to go to the baby groups and stuff, a lot of the time, be like, no, they're not my people, you know, that's not the sort of person. And I have been so surprised time and again how I might have judged that book straight up the gate and said, that's just not a person for me. When further down the line, they're probably my best friends. And I have been absolutely amazed that we found each other, regardless of how many differences or whatever else might have been there. And that might be a much stronger connection, you know, and I think that's also a really nice thing to think about, that isn't always exactly how you think it's going to go. Right, Loraine, I'm coming to get you. So we have been talking a lot about possibly the loss, I suppose, between generations that we're seeing. I mean, of course, we're abroad, so we don't have the same closeness to our parents and grandparents, if we like. But I've spoken to many people who've sort of said that connection between grandparents and extended family and with the children today is often more dispersed, and there isn't that sort of strong bonds that used to be there. And I kind of wanted to sort of put it to you, really, whether you've noticed that communities are not so intergenerational anymore, and how, if you have seen anything along those lines, how you would encourage communities to be more all-encompassing and include all generations between the young and the old, and whether that has any benefits. Long question.
But isn't it an interesting theme?
Yes.
Thank you for the question. It's been a great interest to reflect on it all. As I was explaining to Jenny, in 2022, I did a talk across Mexico, actually, Melissa, on intergenerational workplaces, and I do a lot of conversations with people who are of similar age to me that carry such extraordinary stereotypical thinking about younger generations. And one of the things which is central to what I'm interested in is creating conversations to debunk the stereotypes that we have about, if you're a teenager now, or if you're in your 20s, if you're a millennial, if you're Gen Z, if you're a baby boomer, the fact that the workplace, the average lifespan now is 100 years, and is going to get longer. There's talk now in the UK to raise, retirement age to 70. I mean, can you imagine working from sort of 20, 21 through to 70 years of age? So that the whole shape of society is changing. Mm-hmm. We have younger, people going into urban areas for work while leaving elderly parents in rural communities. We have the impacts of COVID that have really increased isolation and loneliness. We have the impact of technology and digital communities. We are losing our town centres. We are losing our community centres. We're losing our libraries. We're losing all of these locations and spaces that used to bring people together naturally, even if the extended family was moving further apart from each other. The level of isolation now in nuclear families is at an alarming level of concern. As we know, this is leading to really severe mental health issues and issues of well. That's why we talk about well-being and mental health all the time now. And there are, many symptoms that are now apparent about this disintegration of community across generations. I think this is an extraordinarily important thing to look at. I know that there's projects going on across Europe and in the States of how do you bring, particularly older people with younger people together. You have the housing crisis, you have people in their 20s and 30s who can't afford to buy their own home, and you've got older generations of people who've lost their spouse and are living in big houses by themselves, and therefore there's projects underway to try and create rental arrangements for younger people to move in with an older person. There's projects to try and give up space in care homes that younger people, they get their room or their space free of rent in order to help out as a carer with the older community who are so lonely and isolated. So I think that it's important to look at new projects, new community events that can be done, that can bring people from different generations together. I do want to stress the fact that I get a little bit frustrated with the constant talk about why or how one generation is different from another. And there's no doubt that political, economic, technological circumstances change from one generation to another, and these impact on that generation for sure. But there are core constants that we seem to just ignore. The themes of respect and trust and feeling valued and feeling like you're making a positive contribution, and the sense of giving to a purpose more than yourself, you know, being able to have your voice heard, to be listened to, you know, the themes of well-being. These are not generational specific. You know, that every human being is in need of these aspects of their self and their connection with other people. And these are key themes that we can talk about, you know, with even with coffee times, you know, workshops on each of these themes, you know, opportunities to learn from each other. You know, that older people have got, you know, so much experience of life and so much resilience and so much emotional intelligence, and younger people are fast and dynamic and, you know, innovative and scary because they just think and operate at such electrifying speed nowadays. But, you know, we need to sit down and share our common themes and how we can benefit from each other in society. And I'm very keen to see some initiatives taking place that we can work on together. Yeah, I'm very keen to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I was just thinking when you said just then about the All People's Home and then combining that with students. I just read something about it was in the music department of university, and it was actually the music students, only music students were allowed to live in this Old People's Home, because they then, as they're like, you know, how they'd pay back, they'd play their wonderful music then to the people in the home. I thought it was just such a lovely idea, and that also had amazing feedback from the students at how much that was amazing. They could talk about things with the you know, the people living there, the residents, and it was just an amazing relationship that developed there. I wanted to ask you whether you think that the sort of loss or decline in religion has also played a part in this, because you sort of mentioned how values and respect and trust and all these things. And I do often think about that. You know, I was brought up Catholic, so I went to church and I learned, you know, the 10 Commandments, and we did look at the Bible at school, and that was just part of how we were brought up. My children, on the other hand, haven't had that going to church every Sunday, and the school is also quite, you know, they sort of keep themselves out of religion, really. They don't sort of take one way or the other and don't necessarily give that teaching that I might have had when I was growing up. And I wonder sometimes, unless you're really focusing on yourself as a parent, whether there's that lack of information for the young, that they're not actually learning some of those basic teachings, which is not to say whether the religion is right or not, but it's how you treat one another and how you help each other and what kindness means and all these things. And I do wonder if that has become a bit of a void within our society, that there isn't something that's replaced that. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah. Well, also brought up as a Catholic and have very
lucky you.
Clear memories of the community centre, you know, attached. Yes, well, I'm a lapsed Catholic now. I tend to personally to not think of religion as a core theme. I think of spirituality and morals and value systems, which of course are all of the basic principles within every religious doctrine. So I think that one of the things I fear, I suppose, when we use the term religion, is that there's so much friction and so much tension from one religion to another religion. So I like to think about the core values that hold all kind, humankind together.
But you need like a church of kindness
of,
almost, or a church of morals or values or something that is encompassing for everyone,
Yes. I mean, I think those things I was, mentioning that, there isn't a single human being on this planet who does not want respect. I mean, that is but what does that mean? Do people understand how you gain respect? Everyone talks about trust, but you can't just go around to people and say, trust me. You have to learn how to build connections, and you have to learn what it means to give, that in order to give is how you then receive. I mean, Jenny and I had this conversation the other day about the core principle of selfishness at the heart of coaching, which I said to my coach at the beginning. I said, I can't do that. I can't be selfish. My mother would never forgive me. Selfishness is not a principle. It's not a value that we share in our family. He said, stick with it. You'll understand what we mean by selfishness. And of course, it's more to do with being able to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you're able to help everybody else on the plane. And that, I think, is just people don't understand now how to build trust, how to build relationship, how to talk about shared values. And I think we need more conversations. And it's just nothing nicer than sitting together and talking about these things. Every human being has values, and they just don't get a chance to explain, why they're frustrated, why they feel society or religion or the governments have let them down. I mean, these are things we can talk about in safe spaces.
Yeah. And this is why people aren't then necessarily communicating with one another anymore. If you're not my opinion, I'm not listening to what you've got to say. I'm not going to get anywhere doing that.
Yeah.
Faye, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, thank you, Loraine. It's really got me thinking. I'm sitting here thinking, I mean, there was so much that you talked about there, and it made me think, well, I had, lots of thoughts. I guess there's a danger that with the way that we quite often live our lives, that certain generations are forgotten, because if they are retreating, into their own homes, and you don't even know, you can't see them, you're not aware that they're, and that's one of the problems. You're not noticing it because it's not in front of you. And I guess the other thing, just thinking about my own community, is this kind of modern day phenomenon of busyness, whereas versus for me, going back to my childhood, no one was so busy they couldn't have a conversation. And I think of quite often, even in my street, we've got a really lucky, really friendly road that I live in. There's quite a mix, an intergenerational mix, but of course a lot of young families just very rarely at home. They're either at work or dashing out here or dashing out there, so there just isn't that time to sort of have those connections with your own neighbours, unless perhaps you purposely make that happen. And I definitely think it's really needed. How you do that, I mean, like you say, it needs to be thought about. And one of the things I would say is I'm really enjoying, you mentioned about the Walk Active, and actually thinking about it, that's my purpose for doing that was helping people to move more, so they didn't have to go to a gym, so they could get outside, so I could build a community. But actually attracts, because it's walking, it's attracting all kinds of different ages. And so actually that's, without really planning it, bringing together different generations. And it's really nice to see the conversations that are happening, and they're all having a laugh together. And so without specifically aiming for that. That's it, you know, I guess it's finding things that connect everybody, that appeals to everybody. And if
Yeah, I
you
don't know
can
if you can
find
appeal.
those things, then that, you know, that helps.
I just read a book by Billy Baker, and it's all about making friendships and how it's important. And it was coming back to purpose. Like, you need a purpose. So that you're doing your walking club, that is the purpose enough. So it's bringing the people together, and they've got something in common. And from that, when you find something that brings the people together, then you have the conversations. And I think that is really insightful, that, and really important, because I think if you have that purpose, you're going to get up and you're going to go on a Wednesday evening and make the effort and do it. And I think that's the point, that you've got to find, it's got to be enough to get you to go out, right? And I think when you say busyness, I mean, how much time are we actually wasting though? Like, if it's really about priorities, am I just scrolling for 2 hours? Am I just watching Netflix for an hour? And potentially what I'd be getting back if I just went out for an hour and did something else might be so rewarding.
Yeah. I agree. I'm just saying, you know, whenever you
Yeah.
speak to people, they're just so busy.
Yeah, and that's
I
so
don't know
sad, isn't it? But it affects all of us. We all think we're busy, but
Yeah.
are we? What's busy?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
wonder
I know what you're
sometimes.
saying.
And also, you know, I think it's necessary to be open as well when you meet people from another generation. I mean, I am me and you are you, but while we are together, let's try to mix a little bit. Yes, I have to go a little bit from my wherever I am to try to reach you. So I'm thinking, if I want to buy a present for someone and that person likes, I don't know, plants, and I don't like plants, well, I will go to a plant store, right, to get something for him, for her. So what can I offer to another generation? What can I give in order to be attractive, so that person wants to spend time with me as well, right? So, and also rituals. We used at home with my family, we used to have Sundays together. We used to go out somewhere for dinner and go to church as well, and or go to a shopping mall, something together. And I remember as a teenager thinking, oh my gosh, again Sunday, again I have to go, I have to dress somehow, I have to. But then you have no option, and you get accustomed.
Yeah.
And you plan you do your schedule, knowing that from this hour till this hour you will be busy with your parents and your brothers, sisters, and then eventually you kind of like it. And then you are pushed to being to talk, to share, and then actually it's enjoyable
It's
and you are
good,
waiting
yeah.
for that time, you know. But it needs discipline from parents, and also determination, because it's easier to say, okay, you don't want to spend time with me, I am not attractive to you anymore, we cannot connect, we cannot communicate, so better go by yourself. I would go by myself, we will be in peace. So my children, whether they like or not, have to have this custom of our ritual to spend some time together on Sundays.
Yeah, I really missed the gardening with my grandfather, for instance, right? I was there every Sunday, had to garden, but actually it was amazing. Used to get pushed in the wheelbarrow around the garden and stuff, and it was just bonding. But if you'd have asked me neutrally, would you want to? No, I don't want to go and help in the garden. When you were there, it was the best ever.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's touching on a really key point there, Penny, because, you know, young people they think they know what they want and what they like, and they don't always know what they're missing or what value they're getting from what they do. So there's a little bit of pull and push involved in, I mean, when kids are really young, we're very good at trialing lots of things, you know, and then we see which things they kind of gravitate towards. And then they get a bit older, and then they get set in their ways, and their peer pressure becomes really strong, and they start to lose out on some of the other. And then it's like, we're going to go over and see your grandparents, and like, oh God, do I have to? You know, I'd rather stay here. And so there's a little bit of that sort of pulling into environments, because we know, you know, that there is a longer term benefit that's going to come from that. Now, how do you kind of generate that some positive progress when that tension exists between communities is the challenge we face. But I think that our inherent coaching skills come to the fore here, because we have been trained, and we work at conversations, and we work at listening and reading between the lines and picking up little signals that light somebody else's imagination or lights their interest in a topic, and then we're able to find the breakthrough, and suddenly you have a conversation going, and age becomes irrelevant, and the shared interest in that topic takes over. And whether it's a topic, whether it's an activity, and we need to be alert to those potential doors that we can open up to bring, regardless of age, bringing people who are keen on, you know, as I say, an activity or a conversational topic, or just the fact that they want to spend time with people who have such fascinating histories or stories to tell. You know, we've got to do more. We've got to do more about this.
Do you know what would work really well is cooking, right? So get my
Cooking.
16-year-old kid,
food.
tell him there's free food, get someone to show him how to make it like Granny's old recipe. He'd be there in a flash. He'd be at the new club. Food involved. All good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And then that food can happen in different places. You know, it could be in the park, you know, where you're having a picnic together or whatever, and then suddenly you have other opportunities that open up. But it's a food is a great one. No question.
It goes back to the experience. I think where you will get a taste of the value is through having that experience. And I, for whatever reason, have always sought out older. And so this goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier, where, you know, you can look to create your community or your tribe and the people that are around you. And for me, I've always had value in having someone older in that. And it like, currently, I think it's probably my dad, but I'm got at a different stage of my relationship with him, and he's, you know, we're quite, you know, companions, and you know, sharing a lot. But you know, I had a mentor, and actually, I want to ask Loraine, like Penny did have this question drafted, but I'd love to hear more about how you think the role of mentorship, because one of my mentors I had was a retiring 60-year-old man, and I was in my early 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and I look back now, and it's always got a fondness because I've got a soft spot for people who've kind of had more lived experience and older, but like, he also different gender, but like, that was really significant to me, and what I learned from him and his experiences and his take and his perspective. But then I also volunteered, you shouldn't mentor me, but I volunteered for a charity where I'd phone an old lady every week. I used to call her my old lady, and then I realised she was the same age as my mum, and my mum got quite upset by that. She was like, "God, sorry," but she was older. You know, she needed the companionship. But you know, I've reflecting just now. I've realised I've pulled in those people into my life to give me what I've needed. But it leads me to the question that we did draft, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Loraine. You know, how do you think mentorship could play a role in, you know, fostering a strong community, and what experiences have you had with that, or what could we do to bring that more to life?
Because we talked about maybe potentially having that as something for our tweens. As you know, we have our tween talk club, and sort of giving young kids the opportunity to have someone who's not mum and dad, someone out of the family who they might learn new things from or just have a different perspective.
I'm afraid I lost lots of that with a broken, somehow
Did you get Jenny?
connection, but I picked up. No, apart from the question is around mentoring, right? And the value of, I think it's, honestly, I just think it's massively important. I come from an Irish culture, and storytelling is really, really important in Irish culture. And people love to spin a yarn about something that's happened, or I have, even just recently, in fact, when I was doing my counselling and psychology course, I was encouraged to talk to people who were older and to find out, pivotal changes in their life. And I ended up talking to a friend's father who was in his late 80s, and 4 hours, I'm not joking you, 4 hours later, we stopped the conversation. I don't know what happened to the whole evening. I just lost it in listening to how amazing it was, with him telling me what it was like to be a man in his 20s in London, and the changes he'd seen in his community and his thoughts on what were valuable within a community. And oh my gosh, 4 hours of, and I've never forgotten it. Incredibly important. And I think that, mentoring comes in different shapes and sizes. Obviously, I think of it a lot in a professional context, but there is nothing more interesting than looking at, key questions that are relevant to every human being, and getting older people to share their knowledge and experience on it. It's so illuminating, and it's back to that point, Penny, you were making about how you, first of all, you meet people sometimes and you think, oh, this person's not for me, or we don't share anything. We come from different worlds, but nothing. And suddenly you start talking about, how you were impacted by moving from one town to another, whether it was Faye's story of going to school in a different city, and suddenly you have a common theme, and you hear things that you never imagined were going to be so valuable to hear. And as I say, the coaching skills for me are, they're the greatest gift I've ever been given in this world, was to learn how to listen to what other people can say and do, and to give them complete respect for the experience that they have, whether that's the same as mine or not. In fact, it's far more interesting when it's completely different from mine, of course. And that's how I have learned about other people and take a deep interest in them, and a deep interest in who they are. And when they feel that, when people feel that, and it doesn't matter if they're 12 or 22 or 42 or 82, they will engage in that connection. It just happens. It's like magic.
That's such a lovely thought, and I'm just noticing the time, like, to wrap up on, because we're almost out of time. You've got another question, Penny?
I wanted to touch on the men, but maybe we have to leave that for another day.
Yeah. We've tried not to leave the men out, but we've left them till last, so maybe we need to prioritize them at the top of our discussions. But thank you all for all your contributions and perspectives and experience. I loved it, and I love how the time, hopefully the same for everyone, it just kind of flies by, and we really value your input and your time, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And for all
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Lovely. It has been very nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
And you.